I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. This week, I am speaking with previous guest and old friend Alan Shapiro, the author of umpteen books, most recently Diver, out now from Unbound Editions. We talk about that some and about some of the poems in the book. Mostly, though, we talk about form, specifically meter, but also some non-metrical form, different ways of subdividing free verse, thinking about prose poetry. It's a very nerdy conversation, but it just reminded me of what fun it is to sit down with Alan and really throw anything even remotely poetry related at him, because he has so much poetry devoted to memory and is able to, put a coin in him, and he can talk about just about any poet with great learning. So it's really fun to talk to him. I think you will enjoy it, and especially those of you who are who are prosody nerds. So go check out Diver from Unbound Editions, and here is my conversation with Alan Shapiro.
They're just really great, very author-friendly publishing house.
Good, that's nice. Nice change of pace.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Good.
Run by writers, so
Yeah. Well, good. So at least, for the foreseeable future, then it's nice that you're not having to. That's not a worry you have to have figuring out who
not
you're
right now.
publishing
Well,
with.
and there's not that much. I mean, I have the New and Selected, and then maybe another book after that, and that'll be it. I'm very much sort of at the end of things. So this is a really nice soft landing, after a kind of bumpy flight, publishing wise. So I couldn't be happier. What's the state of things with you? And do you have a manuscript now? Or I know that
So I'm very slow. I published Midlife, and then 2 years after that. So I mean, in 2026, I guess just this spring. What is that popping up? I had this little chapbook come out with Rattle. That I was pretty happy with. That's just a little. It's like 18 poems.
This is with Rattle, you said?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, with Tim Green's.
Yeah.
He's great.
He was lovely to work with. Was very my brother did the design, and Tim was did a lovely job sort of adapting their standard template, and I think it came together nicely. And the good thing with them, I mean, they're great to work with in general, but one of the benefits is they have a good circulation, and they send it to all their subscribers. So
that's right.
It ends up in a lot of recycling bins, but at least it also maybe passes through a few hands on the way there.
Exactly, and that's right. I know it. He has a big following. I know it's great.
So that worked out nicely. I mean, I have probably by my lights, half or a little more of what I would think of as a book manuscript, but I'm very slow, and I'm content to be slow. So the chapbook was a nice sort of palate cleanser, I guess, but I'm not in a hurry to put out out the next book.
Yeah, but what's to hurry for? I mean,
right?
Really.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's champing at the bit,
waiting, bated breath.
Yeah. I only wish this had come out sooner. Right? As another sentiment you don't hear that often with.
No, you don't hear that off. Yeah, got it. If it had only been last week.
But slow and steady for the most part. Still, I'm kind of winding down my experiment with trying to. I had this theory, because people always say that I just read Brad Lighthouser's chapter on iambic pentameter last night, and people, there's a lot of claims about like the relationship it has to the English language or the human breath or this or that, and sure, yeah. And as he says, like, it's definitely not the human breath, because I guess we're the only language that got that right, and all the other ones have a different breath where they're working.
Yeah, right.
But my thought was that the argument with suffixes is that they're just unnatural in English, and my thought was that it's so similar to an iambic pentameter line, just a little bit shifted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that it's got to just be a matter of practice. It's got to be
Yeah,
just be a matter like everybody who bothers to try to write Sapphics and struggles with it just has zero practice at it. So
that's
I
right.
tried to
Yeah.
give myself a decent amount of practice just writing nothing but for a
Yeah.
couple of years, and
Yeah.
we'll see how it. I'm kind of winding that down, but like,
Is it just an 11 syllable line? And then
no, it's an 11 syllable line. I mean, I have my sort of there are obviously many different versions of Sapphics
yeah,
people do, and there's the longer, the lesser, and the greater. And I have sort of one specific version, which is 11 syllables and then 5 syllables with a
you go, yeah, the last.
yeah. Basically, it's the phone keeps my daughter is right as she was stepping onto the bus, sort of backing onto it, she mouthed to me and pointed that her stomach was bothering her, and I thought like, well,
Oh,
well,
no.
what are you? So, fuck. Okay, so I gotta, we'll see if something happens, but
Um,
um,
well, if
uh,
you have to stop, if we have to stop,
should be okay. Yeah, I just my phone may be
yeah,
messing around. Yeah, it's I don't know how you would. I think because in if you were doing it in Savix, you would call them choriams or something. But it's
yeah.
basically trochee trochee dactyl trochee trochee.
Oh, so you really just keep it
Yeah,
to
well,
that.
and I'm trying to keep the
Wow.
to my ear.
Wow.
I'm trying to satisfy my ear because I've read a lot of Savix in English. There are some good ones, but precious few. And then an Adonic in the last one. Da 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 da.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm trying to preserve that rhythm enough that when you hear
Yeah.
it, especially over the length of a poem, that's
Uh,
the that's sort of that's the rhythm in your ear. We'll see if I manage to get any of them to sound natural, but it was it's
is,
been fun kind of working in that
and
for a
is there,
while.
are they rhymed or unrhymed? Unrhymed,
Unrhymed, yeah, good
unrhymed,
lord.
is there a subject matter at all, or not?
Oh, I
Not
mean,
that.
well, that's my rule is if I'll sort of go through phases where I'll choose a particular metrical form or rhyme scheme, and then my rule to myself is as long as I keep it in the form, anything I want to write about goes. And with
Goes. Yeah.
these, I usually have a fixed length. With these, I say sort of at least 5 stanzas, but some of
Uh-huh.
them, go on longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I try to just write about whatever comes to mind or whatever I'm working. I do this little thing with these two women I meet on Zoom, and we do a little prompt every week.
Huh. Oh, nice. Yeah.
So yeah. But it's a yeah, I'm going to be doing a little talk, so I'm trying to figure out. I just looked at James Merrill's poem "Voices from the Other World,"
Yeah.
yeah, I really liked it more than I remembered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about form and the unconscious.
Does that you giving a
Yeah,
talk on this? You said?
I'm supposed to give a spiel for this thing. It's called the Think Symposium, and they do it every year, every 2 years. I've had some friends and acquaintances do it. I've watched a couple of their lectures. It's done on Zoom,
Hmm.
um, and I actually the one that most stuck with me is by this guy David Southard, whom I had maybe seen his name here and there, but he was basically championing the system of Derek Attridge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is just a sort of basically just hitting stresses.
beat prosody. Yeah, he calls
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Yeah. Which I found pretty convincing
Yeah, I did too.
overall. Although I found his system for annotation was pretty awful.
Well, the thing is that it
Yeah.
starts out saying this is going to simplify things and you're going to be able to find,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it becomes, he's just replaced one set
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
insane
it's
complications with another.
capital B, lowercase b, capital O,
Yeah,
lowercase o.
yeah,
David Southern calls it the boobs system,
yeah,
which is
I've
just
just,
not. Yeah, it's not
yeah,
really usable at all.
no, no, not at
But
all.
like basically a 5 beat line does
Yes,
feel
exactly.
very natural, and it was funny.
That's right.
Like rereading this, I realized like there are a number of these poems that are either in blank verse or in a very loose iambic pentameter.
Who's my, which
Yours,
you're,
yeah,
well,
your
yeah,
your
no,
book,
absolutely.
yeah,
Even the prose poems are in iambic, so many of them are in
right,
iambic. But
right.
no, it's either a 5 beat line or there are actually blank verse.
Yeah, there's some that are proper blank verse, yeah, and then
Yeah,
some are
and
a
then
little
most of
loose,
it is
and
just
yeah,
loose, and then and even the free verse is very close to the sort of. And a lot of times, it's the line itself might not be iambic, but if you go from caesura to caesura, you'll
Right.
find a metrical unit. Attridge says that it's the 4-beat line that's the most natural to English in that, as I
Yeah, yeah,
recall.
yeah. Nichols and Baker
But
says the same thing. I guess that's the
yeah,
claim about, yeah, the Anglo-Saxon meter
yeah,
being the heart of
yeah.
it. Um,
Anyway, but
yeah. Though
so
I liked Brad Lighthouser's claim, which was that the cattywampus, the fundamental asymmetry of iambic pentameter is part of the appeal. That you
mm,
can't quite split it perfectly in half, that it
right.
always tips a little bit to one side
That's
or the
nice.
other,
That's
that's
interesting.
part of what makes it pleasing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he points to I hadn't heard it before. I mean, though I believe it based on his writing, that Hausman apparently said an octosyllabic line octosyllabic lines cease to be verse when they are unrhymed.
Hmm.
That basically, like, if you're going to have this tidy little 4-beat line,
Yeah,
you got to have rhymes. But with a 5-beat line, it somehow
it's
can stand up on its own.
it's interesting. I know, and I think it's because of the asymmetry, and it allows for a great more variation in the way the
Yeah,
sentences
yeah,
are
yeah.
told to the line.
Including one of those beats
And
usually is a little bit minor, is sort of a
and I
soft one.
yeah, exactly. And I also think that there's something wi about the odd number of 10. I
Right,
mean, it's an even number,
right.
but the but
5 feet. Yeah.
but 5 feet exactly. And it reminded me of something that Elizabeth Darius, who's Robert Bridges' daughter, who wrote primarily syllabic verse. And
Ooh.
in her collected poems, in the intro to it, she says that her syllabics are always odd numbers,
Yes. Yeah,
either
yeah, yeah.
5, 7, or 9,
Right.
because a heavily stressed, say, 9-syllable line is going to sound like pentameter. A lightly stressed 9-syllable line is going to be tetrameter. So you have a wider range of registers to sort of play
Yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas if it's 8 syllables, there's not a whole lot you can't generate as much variety
The,
among 8 syllables.
I was told the same rule of thumb in grad school, but for but for more mercenary reasons. They said if you write syllabics in even numbered lines, there's a good chance people will think you're just bad at writing
I'm
accentual
bad at
syllabic
writing.
verse,
Yeah,
right? Like
that's
the odd number sort of signals that, like, no, it's syllabics.
right. But it's also hard to avoid iambs in even
Yeah, yeah,
numbered
yeah, yeah,
lines. It just
yeah.
is. I mean, if you have any experience with them,
Yeah. Oh, and
really.
yeah, no, it's which is why, I mean, as I think it was Mark Strand called it the devilishly cool option, in his words, was rhymed syllabics.
Rhyme
That sort
syllabics.
of like it
That's
tightens
what
it off and it makes it
and
crisp in a way that, yeah.
yeah, that and Darius has a lot of her poems are rhymed and rhymed quatrains. They're actually, if you haven't read her work, she's just
What
fantastic.
dairy? What's this?
Darius, Dary Ush, Darius. And she's Robert Bridges'
Elizabeth
daughter,
Dariush. Okay.
Elizabeth Darius. And her collected poems was published by Carcanet many years ago, and Donald Davy wrote the intro to it. And I learned about her actually through Ivor Winters, and he writes about her. And um, just a very unknown, very little known British poet.
Yeah, this looks like just the first thing that popped up is a little. It looks like looks like syllabics in reverse terzerima.
Uh,
It's all right. Yeah,
yeah,
no, I'm intrigued. I'll look
yeah,
at.
yeah. She's really lovely. I think she's a wonderful poet at her best.
Yeah,
And
no, I'm glad to know about her. So yeah, I was going to say the it was in one of your syllabuses when I subbed in for you a couple times here when you were teaching, and you pass along your syllabus and what the other class was working on, and I always read whatever syllabus it was because it was basically like a little impromptu manual,
yeah,
which I always found useful, and it was in one of your syllabuses that I encountered, I thought, the clearest and most convincing distinction between accent and
and stress.
stress.
Yeah.
Would
Mhm.
would would you mind, just for anybody who's listening, because I know a lot of people listening are sort of meter junkies.
Yeah,
Yeah, would you
yeah,
mind just quickly summarizing that?
yeah. And I didn't. come up with this
Sure.
distinction. It was what is his name? It's a little book called Versification that was published by the University of, well, Michigan State University Press originally, and then I think it was reprinted by Michigan Press. It's called Versification. Basically, every syllable in a line has stress by virtue of the fact that it's pronounced. It may have a little stress, it may have a lot of stress, but every syllable has stress. The syllable that takes the accent is the syllable within the foot that has the most stress. So it's possible to write, scores of iambic pentameter lines and have no two being quite the same because of the constant variation of degrees of stress among unaccented syllables and constant variation of degrees of stress among accented syllables. So the poem that I always used was The Heron by Theodore Roethke. So it begins with a pretty straightforward line of verse, which you define, which by this guy's definition would be a line of 5 feet, 5 accents, 5 heavily stresses, and the heavy stresses coincide with the accents. That's what makes a perfect pentameter line. The heron stands in water where the swamp.
Yeah.
And then the next line has deepened to the blackness of a pool. And there you have pretty much either 4 or 5 in the of accents in the first line and 4 or 5 heavy stresses. They coincide. The second one has deep into the blackness of a pool, has 3 heavy stresses and 2 very lightly stressed iambic feet. They're all iambs because they follow the lighter, heavier, or the light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy pattern. But the degree of lightness in every unaccented position and every accented position is constantly changing. His wide wings flap but once to lift him up. I mean, if I were going to read it like a Frankensteinian iambs,
Right.
his
Yeah.
wide wings flap but once to lift him up. But
Yeah.
it's his wide wings flap but once to, or like with how sad steps, oh
Yeah.
moon,
Yeah.
it's the sky. And why would in the second position, why in the second foot, why would sad steps sound, most people would regard it as a spondy, right? Sad
Right. Yeah.
steps.
Yeah.
Except the grammar tilts the stress a little bit more toward the noun than the adjective because an adjective is modifying a noun, right? So it's the steps is the input, but then the alliteration slows it up further. So you get one with how. So we could say, like, if I were going to use numbers to indicate degree of stress, the first foot would be like with how. So maybe either 1-4 or 2-4 with how, and then the second would be 3-4. So you have 4 degrees of rising emphasis within the first 2 feet. With how sad steps, oh moon, and then it becomes 1-4, oh moon, and then it's 2-4, 2-4. Thou climbs the skies. I mean, we're not always going to agree on the
Yeah. Yeah.
on how much stress an unaccented syllable takes, but that to me that's just the simplest way to, and you don't really need much more than. And then when you have substitutions. Well, then you count. I mean, the way I always taught prosody is the first thing you do is you count up the number of syllables. So
Oh,
if
okay. Wow. All right.
that's the first thing. You just count
Huh.
up the syllables of every line. And if it's 10, 10, 10, 12, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10, 9, 12, 12, 9, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, well, that it's going to be somewhere in the realm of the pentameter because
Right.
that's the line that gets repeated most often.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just in there simple, it's just quantity,
Yeah.
right? Then, okay, so I count up the number of syllables. So in the first line, I've got 10 syllables, my worthy Lord, I pray you wonder not, and that's, 2-4, 2-4, 2-4, 2-4 all the way across. Or even a better example would be, say, The Oxen by Hardy, which is in common meter, 4-3-4-3. But it's so varied. Some of the 4-beat lines have 10 syllables. Some of the 4-beat lines have 8, 7 syllables, and it's just constantly varied.
Yeah.
So what you do is you count up the number, you realize after when you get to the end of counting the numbers that this is going to be a common meter. So it's going to be playing at 4 beats, 3 beats, 4 beats, 3 beats. That's no matter what the number of syllables, that's sort of the pattern.
Yeah.
The other thing is you count up the number of syllables, you divide up the line into feet. If you have fewer than 10 syllables, there's going to be either, a beheaded foot somewhere,
Right.
but you have to scan it in a way that doesn't in any way violate how you would naturally say the words and the
Right.
syllables,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So if I said, like,
Yeah.
I understand your meaning by your look, perfect pentameter line. If I had, my first draft of it was, your meaning I understand by your look. And I think, oh, that's a pentameter line because I got 10 syllables. Well, no,
Yeah.
because
No.
in order to hear the pentameter, you would have to say those words the way nobody would ever say them under
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
emotional pressure. You just sound like you're crazy. Your meaning I understand by your look. It's ridiculous. It's your
Yeah.
meaning I understand by your look. So it's really a 4-beat line. It's not a 5-beat line.
Right.
It's 4 major stresses, right? But I understand your meaning by your look. You get the polysyllabic word into the right position, and so you don't have to distort the way you would say any of the words or syllables in order to hear the pentameter, right?
Yeah. 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 And that
That's it.
no, I mean, it is. I think you're pointing out too that that tendency of the pentameter line to have one soft stress, to have one
That's
kind
right.
of weak stress,
That's right. Right.
also makes it all that much easier to fuck up. Because if you
That's
if
right.
you if you throw off the rhythm a little bit, it very easily falls into a 4-beat line.
That's right. Exactly. And okay, so look in the Hardy poem, there's a line that has it's that would be, if it were in a blank verse, a perfect, well, or a passable pentameter line. An elder said, as we said, it's the, Christmas Eve and 12 of the clock, now they are all on their knees. An elder said, as we sat in a flock, and then by the embers in hearthside ease. So if I could imagine that line, if that line was like the 7th or 8th line of pentameter, 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 the expectation to hear pentameter would would invite you to promote the stress on as. So you would say, an elder said, as we sat in a flock, or to promote the stress on we. An elder said, as we sat in a flock. But you don't say it that way because it's Christmas Eve and 12 of the clock. Now they are all on their knee. You hear the extra syllable, the anapes. An
Yeah.
elder said, as we sat in a flock. That's how you preserve the 4-beat
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
But you got to know what the game is. You have to know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
game is
Yeah.
played. You have to know what form,
Yeah, yeah,
what the
which is
pattern
also
is.
which is partly why like you wanna. I mean, again, another like rule of thumb I was always taught was if you are going to incorporate substitution, especially non-standard substitution, don't do it in the first line. Like
No,
hold
exactly.
off a little bit.
Hold
Give
off.
people a sense of let them catch the beat.
Absolutely, because if you're varying from a pattern that hasn't been established yet, a reader's
There's
only
no
going to hear
pattern.
twice. There's no pattern. Yeah, you got to
Yeah,
set
yeah,
up the
yeah.
pattern. So that's why you count syllables so that I know that if it's a pentameter line and I have 13 syllables, I'm going to have a lot of lights out. There's going to be a lot of lightly stressed syllables in that line,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And if it's 9, or there's going to be some kind of clustering, Yes, I mean, with how sad steps, oh moon not climb sad, you have with how sad steps, 3 heavy stresses, moon, climb, sky. So you have a lot. I am a pentameter line with 5 feet, 5 accents, but 6 heavy stresses.
So this is and because you threw in earlier, you threw in a couple of sets of numbers. Some of the numbers are referring to the number of feet in a line,
That's
right?
right.
But
And
then you threw in briefly numbers. I think you said 2424
syllables.
all the way across. Where I
Yeah.
think you were referring to the degree of stress
The
using
degree
the
of stress.
the 4
That's right.
level system,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Which is was that Fitzgerald's? Whose system is that?
Uh,
Who came up
I
with
don't
that?
know. I don't know. This guy, it's either not McClintock, McCormick, fuck, well, I can't remember his name. I got the book somewhere. But the main thing is just that all syllables have stress, but the syllable that takes the accent is the syllable within the foot that has the most stress. That's
Right.
sort of
Yeah,
simple
yeah.
rule I go by.
So this is this funny kind of double double consciousness is too weighted a term for it, but this way I've had of thinking about meter lately, where in I think Joshua Meakin does this and Brad Lighthouser does this as well, where they'll scan using basically sort of the standard binary notation system, but then they'll overlay on top of that the 4 level system.
That, yeah. And would do it with the numbers, and I would do
Right.
it with
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
numbers.
One,
Yeah,
two,
same
three, four.
thing.
Yeah. What's the
Yeah,
level?
exactly.
And using both of those together sort of clarifies,
Yeah.
the both the meter, but also the modulation within the meter.
The rhythm.
Yeah.
You can't determine what the rhythm is unless you know what the meter is, because the rhythm is always these significant modulations of a repeated pattern, of
And
a
there's and where and you made reference to this. I saw Josh Megan had marked up a poem. I was working on a manuscript of a young poet last night, and I was kind of marking there were places where she was writing in pentameter, but then occasionally you'd sort of like, by having too many anapests in a row, she would start to establish a counter rhythm.
That's
And
right.
that's where, like, if you overlay those two systems, you can start to see where modulation is fine and good until modulation begins to establish a second
Absolutely.
contrasting rhythm,
That's
at which
right.
point you fall into another, meter.
Then they're not working together.
Right. Like,
They're pulling in different directions. And the whole point is it's like a good jazz improvisation. There's a point you can only go so far from the melody. If you think of the melody as
right,
the
right,
meter
right.
and the modulations as the rhythm, there's no sense, there's no way of making sense of the rhythm except in relationship to the form, the pattern that's being varied and modulated and suppressed here or made emphatic there. And I mean, they all go together. It's not, you can't, as I said, the dichotomies that we normally think of when we, whether it's, free verse, metrical verse, or rhythm and meter, and you realize that or openness and closure, they're all they're all dependent on each other. You can't have a sense of openness unless there's something you experience as closed that's being opened. And
Yeah.
you can't have a sense of closure unless there's a sense of something open that yourself being shut down. And everything is always meaningful in relationship to everything else. If there's nothing on it, I was just for Warren Wilson. I shouldn't. I'm not. I was reading an essay by somebody that was scanning a Hopkins poem, and the person who wrote the essay had forgotten or didn't know that uh, you don't scan words when you're scanning, you scan
Oh,
syllables.
oh
You don't,
no.
yeah, and so she was scanning clauses and phrases and words, and
As if those were the feet.
as if those
Oh,
were the feed.
oh no.
And I said, no, it's the scansion is an abstract principle. It's just a row of
It's
syllables. That's all
perpendicular to
there
the
are.
denotation is the whole
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah. And but it's not a rocket science. It's very easy when you just learn a few basic principles. And then you realize that those principles of sameness and difference, of pattern and variation, they extend to really everything. It's basic, it's
Yeah.
fundamental to our experience of art and actually meaning of significance is pattern and variation. There's no getting around it, you know. Um,
There was an essay I read recently that I found a little bit frustrating by this guy Brad Scow, who is smart but is not, his background is not mostly in poetry, but he was criticizing various systems for describing meter, basically claiming that they were inconsistent, or they were not, you couldn't find rules that stood up in a consistent way. And the thought that kept coming to mind was that all of these, as you said, you can come up with, you can identify various rules of thumb, you can identify various principles, and there's a lot of complexity potentially there. But finally, the standard that everything has to answer to is the human ear and the human memory.
absolutely.
Is it convincing? Does it sound right? And is it
That's
close
right.
enough that I remember it? As again, as Brad would point out, like a rhyme that's 15 lines apart is no longer a rhyme because nobody can hear it.
That's right. Because and as Brad has written, I don't know where because I read it somewhere and it was an important insight for me years ago. He said that rhyme is always a backward turning
Right.
gesture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's always sending you back as you move forward through a poem. It's sending you backwards.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Again, so
Because it's not there until the second
I,
half
and a
arrives. Yeah.
rhyme is another expression of pattern and variation.
Yeah, yeah.
You're repeating something in order to experience the difference between the meaning of the two words. I mean, in a way, you said, that rhyme is like it's like a kind of semantic rhythm. I mean, it's you experience a sameness, you hear a sameness in order to semantically register a difference, a
Yeah,
meaning,
yeah,
a
yeah.
significant difference. Metaphor is like in a way it's like semantic rhyme, and rhyme is like as a kind of auditory
figure, or yeah,
figure.
yeah.
I'm getting a little confused with my terms, it's all pattern and variation in different a motif in a story or in a poem, a repeated image that repeated in different contexts. So that it's a way of dramatizing a change of meaning. It's the same thing repeated in a different context. It both calls attention to a continuity, and as well as by the virtue of the sameness, it also calls attention to a difference. I don't know how you can, that's what makes writing free verse such a challenge, is that you've got to make up, it still has to be patterned. You still have to have
So
patterns.
what is that? What is that? Because you're a rare. Was talking to Victoria Moole the other day about how English, or UK poets seem a little bit more comfortable living in between free and formal verse, whereas Americans often kind of fall hard, crisply on one side or the other of the divide. You actually straddle it and have
Yeah.
straddled it for a long time. What does it actually mean to write sonically patterned free verse?
It means that you're paying more attention to the syntactical system in relation to the linear system,
Okay. All
lines and
right.
sentences,
So this is
and
where
how
you make your distinction
oh,
between like enjambed free verse and phrasal
right,
free verse.
right, and phrasal free. Those are the two extremes. But in really a good poem, it's going to, if it something has to sort of motivate the turn from the one kind of system, or if you can regard it as a system, to another, where the lines and sentences coincide, where they are played off against each other, shouldn't just be random. There should be some reason for it, and but then there's also long sentences, which are also rhythmical structures.
Right.
You can think of the sentence as a metrical structure in the abstract, and then how it functions in a particular context gives it a kind of rhythmical distinctiveness. Loose sentences, periodic sentences, loose sentences, where the main clause comes at the beginning and then you tack on a lot of dependent clauses after that. But
Yeah.
Whitman and the catalogs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, and then you've got, okay, so here you've got this great democratic bard who believes in America and equality and in individuality. And so he's got a line, he has a poem in which there's very little grammatical subordination, which coincides with his commitment to
Right. Yeah.
democracy. We're
Setting
all
one
equal
thing next
before
to
the
the
law,
other. Everything's,
right?
yeah, horizontal
And then,
rather
but
than
then, but
vertical.
every
Yeah.
line is rhythmically distinct. Every
Right.
line has maybe a varying number of clauses, and the clauses
Yeah. Yeah.
themselves are
Yeah.
different. And so you've
Yeah.
got difference within sameness, which
Right.
again is
I
a
was gonna say,
kind of
whereas Horace, who loves the periodic sentence, also says, "I hate the crowd." Right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Fuck you. You got to wait till the end to find the verb. Yeah.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, well, that's for sure. Anyway, so it's to me, it's again, I guess this is a reductive way of thinking about this, but to me, it connects a lot of things that are normally thought of as mutually exclusive when in fact they're always, like it's all relative in site specific. Like if George Gascoigne's woodmanship compared to Church Going by Larkin, both poems well, in iambic pentameter, but Larkin's iambic pentameter, particularly in the opening stanza of Church Going, is so varied and so substituted and so that it sounds like a completely random free verse compared to George Gascoigne. My worthy Lord, I pray you wonder not to see your woodsman shoot so oft awry, or that he stands amazed like a sod to see something there go by. You can hear that da 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 da
Yeah.
da da, and then there's a kind of pause at the end of every line, and
Yeah.
the metrical units are emphatic.
Right.
With Larkin, it's once I am sure there's nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church, matting, seats, and stones, flowers. I mean, it's just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're like different. They're not in any way connected to each other. But then if you compare church going to the Pure Products of America Go Crazy by William Carlos Williams, or,
Right.
it's going to sound very formal
Right.
compared to,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's no absolute distinction between these things. They're all on a kind of sliding scale. And the way it moves up and down the scale should be dictated by whatever's going on within the poem. Like at
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the end of church going, beginning of church going is like as close to free verse as a formal poem can get. You don't even hear the rhymes. There are rhymes, but you don't hear them
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
there's so much in jam. And you don't hear the lines because they're broken into little tiny clauses. Many of them, there's also just a bunch of lists in the opening.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that are suppressing the meter, even though it's there. And you can scan it, but it's just,
Right.
but it's still there. You know, rub my hand along the fountain, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. That's the final line of the first part of the poem. Reflect the place was not worth stopping for. But, you know, matting, seats and stones, you know, flowers, brownish
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
some brass and stuff up at the holy, you know, it doesn't sound,
Right.
but then, you know, a serious house, at the end, the last stanza, a serious house on serious earth it is, in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are
Yeah.
recognized and robed as destinies, and that much never can be obsolete, and someone will forever be surprising a hunger in themselves to be more serious, and gravitating with it toward this ground, which he once heard was proper to grow wise in, if only that so many dead lie round. It's like a
Yeah.
different poem,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
but it's the same form.
Right. But it's I mean and it is in uh as an as an emotional or psychological argument, it's Larkin is sort of inoculating us against cynicism with the beginning of the poem in order to achieve by the end the dignity of
Exactly.
those long full lines
Exactly.
that are very
And this is the brilliance of the poem, the word choice, the diction is undercutting the very dignity that it is affirming, because what is it that motivates us to believe in churches? Well, he compares it to physics, gravitation,
yeah,
he
yeah.
compares it to hunger, biological
Right,
need,
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
compares it to gravity. I mean, it's all, robed what is it? Series of, in whose blend air all our compulsion, psychological
Right, yeah,
disorder,
yeah, yeah,
all our
yeah.
compulsion. So that the
Yeah,
language is undercutting the
yeah.
transcendence
There's
that the
nothing vertical or transcendent in that,
no
except for
in
the
the
sound of it. Right.
except for the sound, but the sound is
Yeah, yeah.
resurrecting the what it is in him, the needs in him and in all of us that draws us back
Right.
toward some belief in something,
It's
at
like
least
the cross
emotionally.
of Earth,
That's right.
even if there's nothing
Right.
above it, it's still the
Even if there's
shape is still
nothing above
there.
it. If only that so many dead lie around because we
Yeah,
die.
yeah.
We need to feel, some compensation for that, or some there has to be more than that. So, the other thing, like I mean, in the oxen, the first half of the poem, which is all about being a kid and being told that the oxen are participating in worshiping the birth of Christ, they're on their knees,
Yeah,
but the kids take it on, they take it at face value. They're
yeah,
told this story. But there are all of these lovely anapaests that run through the 4-3-4-3-4-3 line as he's recollecting what it was like to be a kid and believe what you're told, believe in
yeah,
things unseen. Christmas Eve and 12 o'clock, now they are all on their knees. An elder said as we sat in a flock, there's one or two anapaests every line.
yeah,
By the embers in hearthside ease, we pictured the meek, mild creatures where they dwelt in their straw a pen, nor did it occur to one of us there to doubt they were kneeling then, right?
yeah,
So that's the first, and each quatrain is closed. And so then the turn comes to the president when he's no
yeah,
longer a believer, right?
yeah,
And he says, so fair a fancy few would weave in these years yet I feel, if someone said on Christmas Eve, come see the oxen kneel. No anapaests.
no,
So he's created a kind of rhythmical symbol for childhood. Again, it's not inherent in the rhythm, it's
right,
a combination of the rhythm and what the words are saying. And it's specific to that poem that he's created a kind of nursery rhyme like rhythm for the recollection of childhood. And then when he becomes the adult empiricist, the doubting Thomas, the anapaests fall away in that crucial third quatrain. But in the fourth, they're both
yeah.
so then the fourth,
Both are
comes to the
present.
Arsenal. In the yonder Barton,
And the lonely Barton by yonder
the
combe.
lonely Barton, the lonely Barton by yonder combe, our childhood used to know, our childhood used to know, I should go with him in the gloom, hoping it might be so. It's
Yeah,
just, where you have that trochaic
yeah.
substitution, that first foot of the last line creates the illusion of an anapaest.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
because of the two lightly stressed syllables that follow the hoping, and then when you go from hoping to might, it's undercutting the very thing that it appears to be, at least anyway, emotionally attached to, you know.
Yeah.
So again, everything is related to, it all depends on the particular context, and what's established as, and to me, it's just a numerically determined thing. It's whatever gets repeated most often becomes the metrical or rhythmic, the norm of the poem. And likewise, the metrical norm of a free verse poem, I mean, often is coincidence of phrase and line, phrase and line, phrase line, and then there's one where suddenly the phrase is played off against the line. That's equivalent of like a substitution, or there's two clauses, three clauses, two clauses. This patterns within patterns within patterns in poems. It's not simply a matter of meter and or free verse.
I've not studied biblical verse, certainly not in the original. I've really only read the King James and various other English translations. But the claim that one hears frequently is that the prosody is based more on parallel construction,
parallelism, right?
Which is it's funny because in a way that feels like it is at least related to the game you play with your free verse. One of the things that for me, in order for a poem to be, for me even to get my bearings in it, I've got to be able to hear a credible voice speaking. I've got to be able to imagine,
first and foremost, yes,
something like a convincing speaker who could be speaking this.
That's right. I agree. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And what is funny, because I always find this reading your books, that you often use very long sentences, and they're, whether it's free verse or even, like I was going to say, two of my favorite poems in this book are prose poems, which is very unusual. Yeah. But in either case, you will often, it's almost like the game you play is the game of stretching the syntax as far as it can possibly bear to stand, so that basically that a human voice is saying it is the only way to make these words make sense anymore. That if you were trying to read them in some sort of pure logical way, things would fall apart. And there are phrases I will sometimes have to read again. I was looking at this one just recently this morning. All of us were shrinking from only what we called survivors seemed to accept. And I had to read that twice only what we called survivors.
Right.
The thing that we referred to, the people we referred to as the survivors, and what only they could accept. The thing I wonder about, because there are times when your short free verse lines will kind of play. They'll like play the enjambed versus the phrasal free verse in a way that is ambiguous until it's almost like the Brad thing about rhyme. Like, it's only when you get to the later line that you realize whether it was phrasal or enjambed.
Absolutely. And that sense of the end of something actually changing your attitude toward what you've just experienced.
Yeah.
I was thinking that I learned that lesson a long time ago from the comic Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright?
Oh, yeah.
That beautiful, again, one of my favorite sentences in the entire English language is, "I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, and not screaming in terror like his passengers." And it's like, you don't know what the hell this is about until and then the last word completely changes your notion of where that sentence is going. And you can't do that in every sentence in a poem, but you do want some sense of the end to somehow feel like it's significant and consequential, and even if it's within the poem, the end of a sentence or the end of a line, beginning of a line.
That's my favorite Joe Wenderoth line is, "It is better to give than to receive orders." And in fact, like, that's a note I give poets when I'm looking at their poems often, and it's something that I see most often with formal poets, is that they're getting the line to work out sonically, they're getting the prosody tidied up and the rhymes fit, and if there will often be a line break And I will say, well, the line break is anticlimactic here because
That's
it's
right,
not that
exactly.
every line break needs to reverse the meaning, but it
No,
shouldn't merely confirm what we
what
already
we already
expected based
know.
on what
That's
we
right.
just saw. Like it should
That's
at
right.
least add
Yeah.
to it.
It can do any kind, it can do so many different things, but the one thing you don't want to do is to say, reader, you don't even have to continue because you can finish this sentence. You know exactly what's going to
Right.
happen,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And whereas, it's like J.B. Cunningham in his wonderful poem Monday Morning. It makes it varies. It's a it's a syllabic poem, 9 syllables long. It's about going out to check the mail on Monday and not having the whole plot of the poem is he goes out to check the mail. It's in January. There's junk mail and no letter. As he turns to go back into the house, a woman walks by and he imagines that there's a little bit of rustle of flirtation,
Yeah.
a look, and then he realizes, no, I'm just trying to make myself feel better. There's really nothing there. And then he goes back into the house. So the poem moves from bad news to worse news as you cross the line, right? So it goes the flattery has been infrequent. You get to the end of the line, the flattery has been infrequent. You think, well, at least there's been flattery.
Yeah.
And then the next line, and somewhat grudging. The next, there's junk mail, and you think, well, okay, maybe there'll be a letter, and no letter. The weather cloudy with more snow. And I guess it goes on like that. And then there's the soft rustle of flirtation, the look, this anticipation, and then self-esteem sustained by any excuse, by any misconstruction. No, no, it is an
Yeah.
after Christmas world. Anyway, so that's, yeah, it's playing all of that off against each other. You can't do it all the time for sure, but you do want there to be some tension between, when a sentence sort of breaks free of the line and spills over, you want there to be some reason for it and some payoff to the sudden opening. It's like even Larkin, at church going, not church going, the high windows at the end when, rather than words comes the thought of high windows, the sun comprehending glass that shows nothing.
Nothing.
That's, you just build
Yeah.
up and then nothing, and
And
there's
is
no,
nowhere and is endless. And then
and
there
it's
adds
endless.
there's
Yeah,
this suggestion that it's total nihilism, but then there's this other
yeah.
something, this other gesture
Yeah,
toward
yeah.
yeah.
And the other something is the desire for something, which persists even in the face of nothing. One still wishes there were something, But all of that stuff is part of the movement of sentences and lines. And again, it's always a set. There's always two things. For there to be the one thing of rhythm, there has to be two things. There has to be meter, there has to be variation modulation, there has to be sentences, there has to be lines. And then if there's just sentences, there has to be some play between expectation for, closure of a sentence, withholding a verb, giving the verb, suddenly giving a fragment, long sentence, power of long sentences, the short one. So, it's all part of the same sense of leading someone to expect something in order to then surprise them in some way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
That yeah,
so
and that does. I mean, that's because you have so many of your poems talk about this thematically, but there is, if there's like a formal tendency across a lot of your poems, it does seem to be that the syntax is always saying, wait, 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 no, there's more,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yet but the denotation is often like, oh, there's nothing, and there's no
there's
hope,
nothing.
and it's all over.
Yeah, but then if that were the case, then why write?
Right.
Why keep
Yeah. But
writing?
I've got enough. But one more joke. But one more clause. But one
Yeah,
more
yeah,
elaboration. Yeah.
yeah. And maybe this time I'll get
Yeah.
it.
There was something funny I noticed only recently because High Windows is, one of my favorite poems from back in college. But there was
Yeah.
something I noticed just recently because I was reading and then looking back and thinking about the Denial of Death, the Becker book.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and a
Yeah.
moment I hadn't quite noticed there's the line in the middle when he imagines, he says, I wonder if anyone looked at me 40
Back
years back
and thought
and
that'll be the
thought,
life.
that'll be the life. No God anymore, or sweating in the dark about hell and that, or having to hide what you think of the
Which
priest.
the
He and
priest.
his lot will all go down the long slide like free bloody birds. This is a great moment. It's very, very, it makes perfect sense. It's very psychologically,
Yeah.
true. We we'd look at
Yeah.
younger generations and think like, oh wow, that, I remember bringing my when I was in high school, bringing my high school girlfriend. She was in college at the time. She was bringing my girlfriend to home, and my granddad was there, and she was wearing some tiny little halter top with no bra, and he said, I don't understand how Matthew can control himself. Like how can he just spend time around this woman and not just be all he's just walking around half naked. I don't understand it, and like this is insane. So it's like it's very true and universal sentiment, but there's a
Yeah,
funny little quirk in it, that the person he's imagining saying that'll be the life, no God anymore, or sweating in the dark about hell and that, and that person was raised
to believe in
worrying
God.
about God, worrying
Yeah,
about hell, and I was raised worrying about God, worrying about hell, and what's very true is
yeah,
that although I don't believe in God and I don't believe in hell, there's definitely part of me that still feels it.
absolutely.
And so
Yeah,
what that, imaginary older, observer is saying is it's not real. And I know it's not real, but I
but
still have to worry about it.
I wish it. Yeah, but yeah,
It's
but
I was taught so much to worry about it that even though I don't believe in it now,
I,
I'm not free of it.
but isn't that basically that's the oxen we were just talking about. That's
Yeah, yeah,
church
yeah,
going.
yeah.
It's an emotional attachment to what you intellectually disbelieve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
crux of it. That's the tension. But
Yeah.
and
Hoping it might be
if you
so.
think
Fearing
and
it
it,
might be so as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. And but we're all in that position. I mean, wouldn't it be great if what we were taught as kids were actually true?
Yeah.
You know,
Except for the
the
hell
need
part, right?
for it.
Except some parts of it are terrifying, right? Yeah.
But that's the price you pay for meaning. Is that it's, but it's no, I agree. It's but you can't. That's what makes Larkin so wonderful for me is not the anti-romanticism, but the way the romantic desires
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
persist in the face of the recognition that none of it is going to happen or it's going to be as good as it's cracked up to be.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and
That's been the refrain I've had recently talking with Elijah about romanticism is that the best of it is always a tug of war
a
attention.
tug of war. Yeah, the best of everything, as far as I'm concerned, is a tug of war. I mean, there's always, again, it's like in a poem, like you can't set up an effect in a poem unless you set it off from something else. You can't have a significant enjambed line unless you have a series of clotheslines that precede it. It's the same way that it's like with Francesca and Paolo and Francesca when she says there's nothing more miserable than to recall in a time of misery a moment of joy, in a time of sorrow a moment of joy. The two somehow define each other.
And I wanted to ask you about just at a larger level that you have this poem "Lines on an Ex-Friend's Death," and there's a
Yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
yeah.
moment that, at least in my mind, it echoes the line from White Noise, where he learns he's going to die, and his friend says, "Better you than me."
Oh, yeah,
But you
yeah,
have a
yeah.
line where it's in a moment of joy you are recalling a moment of misery, or you're
Yeah.
recalling a sort of like that. There's that these are you have this there was a falling out with another friend. The two of you were both writers. He's dying, and you call him on the phone, and
Yeah.
then
And then we start telling jokes.
yeah, 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 and it ends. All you wanted was to tell old tales again, and pray and sing and laugh
Oh, that's
about
from
who
King
loses
Lear,
and
by
who
the way.
wins.
That's all King Lear. With
Oh God,
Yeah, and the whole thing.
there's
Um,
so much. There's so much in this book that is, sometimes it's explicit, often it's not. That it's just
I,
drawn from other sources. That yeah,
I don't put footnotes in. I
right. No,
just
no, yeah, yeah. I wish I
I
appreciate. Yeah.
I mean, I just footnotes to me in a poem. I remember when I was in a class with Rodney Jones, and someone had turned in a poem with footnotes in it, and I said, footnotes in a poem, it's like the phone ringing during sex. It's just and annoying. And then Rodney says that, and then just people kind of twittered, and then Rodney leaned over to me and said, "So what you're saying is I should stop calling you?"
Right, yeah.
So, but I just, to me, it's just there. I don't care whether someone gets the, I don't think that, but the walled prison of your dying. in the walled prison to tell
Yeah,
old tales again. That's all King Lear. And pray and sing and laugh about who loses and who wins, who's in, who's out, all packs and say. That's all out of kind of a loose paraphrase of what goes on in that one of the closing speeches.
but that's also, I mean, and that's part of the poem as well, because you refer to sort of drunkenly reciting
Yeah,
Dickinson with him earlier,
Dickinson.
and sort of, and you half remember a line, you forget the line, but that
Yeah,
having all of that language floating in the background is part of what it means to just be somebody who reads a lot, who loves,
that's right.
literature.
It's
Would you
also
finish that segment? All you
you
wanted
mean
was,
that third, when you read the whole third section,
yeah,
or
yeah, read the whole the third section. It's not too
okay, yeah.
long. Yeah, yeah.
I had to be egged on, guilted even by a mutual friend to call you on what would be your last day. Your voice, phlegmy, tremulous, already otherworldly, and yet still unmistakably yours. But what surprised me, shamed me even, was the frank, wide open pleasure in it, hearing mine, untainted by grudge or grievance, as if no time had passed, or all time had, for you at least. And in the walled prison of your dying, all you wanted was to tell old tales again and pray and sing and laugh about who loses and who wins, who's in, who's out, all pacts and sects dissolving beyond any need for blessing or forgiveness. When you say before we hang up, please, please, I'm begging you, get me a rabbi before it's too late. I want to convert. So I on cue can ask, why not a priest or minister? So you can deadpan, better one of you should die than one of us.
Yeah.
And
And it's
that's an old Jewish joke.
y-
Jewish guy is in a car accident. He's on the side of the road, and the policeman comes and says, "Can I get you anything?" He says, "Yeah, get me a priest." And he's clearly Jewish.
right.
Get me a priest. Get me a priest. He said, "Why?" I don't want you should die. Than one of us.
Yeah.
So,
But it's, I mean, it has a special poignancy in this poem, not just because,
oh,
one of the ways that friends always convey intimacy, is through insult. What would be an insult outside of the friendship is
that's right.
understood to be a sign of affection within the
That's
friendship.
right. That's
But
right.
it's especially poignant here because these are friends who've fallen out.
Had fallen out
And
in
so
this.
it's reaching back and using hostility again, despite
Yeah,
all that time apart,
that's right.
despite all that actual hostility,
Right.
once more, as if to say, like, this hostility too can suggest
Yeah.
love.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. No question about it. And this book is in a way, if you in a way, it's a kind of the same. It's the second part of the first part of this book would have been my previous book, By and By, which was my COVID book, and a book in which I am absolutely at the lowest point ever in my entire life. It's a book of isolation. It's a book of loneliness. It's a book of despair, really, and this is a book about rescue in a way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
even though the some of the depression that I'm being rescued from is still sort of sticking to me a little bit, but and that's where the love poems come in, and that's why Rachel appears in every section, even though there's a whole section of love poems. She's the you in turning 70. She's the artist in the last section who's doing the drawings of her dead mother. And so there's a poem about, in a way it's about getting beyond without entirely being free of the kind of despair that was really sunk. It was really kind of dominating the ambience of the previous book. So that's sort of how that's sort of as I put this together, that's what I was thinking of. Um,
It is. I mean, a lot of it is love poetry. I mean,
yeah,
in a way that
yeah,
that is. I think as with Larkin, there's sentimentality tend is every all of the caramel is very well salted, as I might say,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
it's actually
yeah,
quite moving, and that is something I was talking with Brian the other day about this, that there's this may, I don't know if this is true or not, but my outsider observation is that maybe to some degree a quintessentially Jewish thing, that a lot of my favorite people are deep pessimists who are very cheerful and funny in person, who are very
that's
friendly. The personality is very warm and winning and life affirming.
right.
The ideas are very bleak.
Right,
often.
right.
But it's
Yeah,
part of what I love about Brian. It's part of what I love about you, and I think that this book marries those in a really convincing way. That
yeah, yeah.
we're able to, we're able to take Lucretius's cup of wormwood because it's got a lot of honey around the rim.
A lot of hundred, right. Yeah, exactly. Well,
Would
and again, again, just always two things that are in, that each
Yeah.
way defines both the intensity and the limits of the other. And to me, the semantic principles are almost identical to the sonic principles in the, you know.
Would you,
Uh,
I want to get you to read this poem in a second. I am curious just because I keep meaning to ask and don't want to forget. I'm usually very resistant to prose poems, and as I said, some of my favorite poems in this book are the prose poems. But as a form,
I don't
I remain a little just unconvinced and uncertain. What exactly is this? What are we
I
doing?
don't know. I've
Okay.
started. I don't know. I don't have an answer because I love the form when it's done, when it's really good. It has to be really good prose, first of
Yeah, yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah.
And but I don't understand. To me, I don't know what. There's nothing that is done in these little vignettes that I don't know why they're in prose. Maybe
Right.
didn't want the distraction of a line. I just wanted the sentences to be the driving force of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know. I honestly I don't have an answer. I started writing prose poems. I don't know, about 10 years ago. In a book called Against Translation, and somehow the decision to do it simply opened up an
Yeah, yeah,
incredible
yeah, yeah.
range of subjects that I never thought I'd ever write about, and
Yeah.
that they're suddenly available to me, that I, for whatever reason, they weren't when I was writing in lines. And I started out doing it I want to just write sentences. To me, I mean, I love sentences and I love syntax, and that's to
Yeah.
me, if I have if I have an audience that I'm writing for, it's the English sentence. It's the sentence. I'm writing for sentences, for the sake of the sentences. And I I love the expressive possibilities of sentences and how they can enact the energies that they're describing. And to me, that's why every now and then I do it. I don't have any answer beyond that.
Yeah,
Um,
which
yeah,
you don't need to have.
yeah,
I'm always
yeah,
curious about, when part of the fun is not entirely being able to bring into alignment one's feelings and one's, intellectual understanding. But
yeah,
yeah, I am always curious
yeah.
about that because there are some, I love Baudelaire, I love Eliot's tiny little prose poem. There
I
are some
love Baudelaire.
really
Yeah,
funny contemporary prose poetry, but I also find it, very annoying often.
yeah. Mhm.
There's nothing more oppressive than a long bad prose poem.
Oh my God. Well, there is a bad Sestina. I don't know.
Oh God,
My heart
that's true.
my
Bad
heart sinks
Sistina's
whenever
pretty
I see a
brutal.
Sestina. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, yeah, that's quite true. Yeah. Bad Sistina's brutal. So I did want to see if you wouldn't mind. I want to see if you might read Last Act, which was one of my
last night. Oh, sure.
very
Yeah.
favorites, and
Yeah.
it is one that's a pretty clean blank
Yep.
verse
My first. No. Yeah.
with I
Except
was
for
gonna
the
say
short line.
there's one
Oh,
notable exception which is
yep.
very much
Yeah.
tied to the the denotation of the line.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's it's Hamlet, I guess. I've
Right.
got.
I was gonna say it's about a play or it's about a
It's about
stage.
a
So
play.
yeah,
Yeah. Right.
it has
Right.
the Shakespeare
Yeah.
blank verse in
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, so yeah, so it is, I think every line is, except for that one short line, every
Yeah.
line is, anyway, so last act, the stage lights cancel what's beyond the stage. The house is quiet. Is it full or empty? Is it the quiet of an opening or closing night? Where have they all gone? The ones who left the stage to us, the ex-showstoppers, scene chewers, the sad hams of self-importance, who brought the house down one too many times, not to seem tired even to themselves. Their villainy, almost vaudevillian, the farther off it feels, which must be why nobody bothered leaving the ghost light on for their own ghost to keep declaiming by. Only these faded scuff marks now remain of all that once so often blocked out strutting and fretting. It hardly mattered who played who, the single scene of ever-changing actors coming and going in repeat performances. Yet here we are again, facing each other, imagining that this time could be different, if only because we know how late it is, how limited the run. Despite the old roles waiting in the wings for one last scene to steal, doesn't it feel, for now at least, unscripted, unrehearsed, as if what we have learned by heart could be by heart forgotten if we play it right? Yeah, so.
Yeah. A little bit of a Macbeth in there too.
Yeah,
Right?
Macbeth too. Yes, no,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I even thought, maybe a ghost of that church going, if only because
And
we know
church
how
goes
late
only,
it is, how limited
and
the run.
you
Yeah,
know
yeah.
you've done a lot of acting. You know that the ghost light in a theater.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm working on a thing right now that starts with that, the ghost light
mm,
going in.
so and anyway, and it's also kind of Shakespearean and just this is an extended metaphor. Kind of a conceit that governs the whole unfolding of the poem.
Yeah, and
So
that's it, and is it earlier in the book? I think it's earlier in the book that you have the prose poem. Yeah, turning 70, which is
yeah,
which responds to Nietzsche's little passage
that's
of the
right.
Gay Science, where he imagines the demon saying, you must live this whole life again and again exactly the same way, and
Yeah,
you elaborate on that, because the observation that's usually made is that you would Nietzsche says, if you, what does he say? Have you once experienced a tremendous moment in which
yeah.
you would answer him, "You are a god, and never did I hear anything so divine"? Has there been one moment in your life that would be worth living it all over again to repeat? And of
Repeat.
course, the converse of that, which is where my mind goes, is like, to all of my moments of great shame and embarrassment that would be repeated forever. But your elaboration is bleaker and more, and that's also that aphorism is the occasion for the whole beginning and the title of the unbearable lateness of being,
Yeah.
because he talks about
Yes.
this being
Right.
the heaviest
Right.
burden, and how
Right.
light it is if it only happens
Right.
once. But your
Right.
your sort of terrifying elaboration is not just that every moment of your own life would have to be repeated, but that your life takes, there's the, use that same figure of, if not the play, the movie, that there
Yeah.
are all of these bit parts in your own place, some of whom are experiencing genocides, some of whom
That's
are
right.
experiencing great
That's right.
horror and misery, and
That's right.
they would have to repeat all
They
of
would have
that
to repeat it
again as
because they're
well.
part of yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which is again,
So,
it transforms Nietzsche's, amor fati into something more like, again, another concern of this book, Tiberius, right? A
yeah,
terrible tyrant who's willing to inflict the
yeah,
most, nightmarish misery on others for the
right.
tiniest bit of comfort for
That's
himself.
right. That's right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That
No,
one.
yeah. It's oh god, and I've forgotten about the Sonderkommando.
Oh well, that yeah,
Jesus, yeah.
I read that memoir by Zalman Grodowski. I think it's called The Last Consolation or something like that. If you
Oh
look up his
god.
name, it's a devastating book. And what's interesting about that book for me was that his prose is so antique. It's
Hmm.
belles lettres. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
written in such a kind of high style, and yet he did it at night after days of just of shoveling people out of ovens and
Right.
getting. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's unbelievable. And so that became an occasion for, how do you write about this? Because he
Yeah.
he he didn't even think about he had all these beautiful little rhetorical turns and flourishes and about what couldn't possibly be anyway
So yeah,
conveyed.
I mean, some of the closest thing to something like hell on earth that maybe we've seen in modern history is the
Yes,
Sonderkommando.
yeah,
Because you are living in hell, but you are also participating in hell.
participating in it, yeah. And then he wrote about it and to relive
Yeah,
it
yeah,
every
yeah.
night in secret,
It
you
feels like
know.
you almost would have to. there are no atheists in the foxholes. There may also be no there may be no Bukowskis in the concentration camp. You know, like if you're
Yeah,
going to bother to write, it's like
yeah,
you almost need the elevated mode. You
yeah,
need it to
yeah.
be something greater and more transcendent in order to, yeah.
Because the idea that it could capture in words what's going on is
Yeah, yeah,
absurd
yeah.
to even think about. You can't possibly do it. So he doesn't even try, except that it's full of, he describes what he did, and but when he starts to when he waxes lyrical and it's just really a strange and then that little note at the end of
Oh
the
God, yeah.
manuscript, just whoever find and it's buried in a berm of ash behind crematorium 2 or 3, and he put it in a cylinder not knowing whether anyone was going to find it. I mean, the faith of that is just the naive, and touching, powerful faith that somehow this story will get out into the world. And even here today, he just doesn't, doesn't even name the uncle, doesn't have it. It's just, it's just amazing. And poignant. I don't know how you get, you can't improve on it. Improve on is the wrong
Right.
term to use, but it's a devastating, it's the most horrifying book I've ever read. But it doesn't try, it doesn't kind of, push your face in it. And it's the fact that he doesn't do that makes it so powerful, because you feel the force of what he can't quite capture. So it's
No,
really about how to write about atrocity. It's not about the atrocity per se. It's about the difficulties, the inescapable difficulties of writing about something that's so unspeakable. You know,
and hope for some sort of,
yeah.
if not redemption, then
Oh,
deliverance against hope, and which comes up again. I mean, that's the title poem, is the the
the long
illustration on the inside of the sarcophagus,
lid of the lid.
looking down, yeah, looking
Down.
down, that's for the benefit of the dead.
Yeah. Isn't
Uh,
that, did you notice there's the image of it,
yeah, on the
isn't
yeah,
it
yeah, in the
beautiful?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's just
That's
astonishing.
so, yeah, the starkness of that is so.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
picture of a literally of a diver. The book's called
Of a
Diver. That's a picture of a
Yeah.
diver jumping off a platform, and it's
Yeah.
on the inside of a sarcophagus lid from how many?
500 BC.
500
500.
BC. Good
Yeah.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I
When,
was gonna say that I hadn't thought about it, but that's also the image you have of the tardigrade,
yeah.
this little tiny lit life form
Yeah.
that can just remain frozen under totally hostile conditions for seemingly an indefinite period of time before being revived and
And
still being
yeah,
alive again. Yeah,
it's still being alive
which is
again.
again, it's yet another figure for poetry, for salvation of some kind, for whatever,
Yeah.
whatever part of ourself gets conveyed.
Yeah. Yeah. The longing for that is everywhere in the book for sure. And then of course hey, hey, look at us. That's my paraphrase of every national anthem that exists. Hey, hey, look at us.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah,
It's so good
and
that
there's
we're
a
not.
yeah, and there's a lot of like I mean, with the Streetwalker poem, with the false teeth poem, there's a lot of like the indignity of preservation as well
Yeah, yeah,
across time.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And then eventually the memento mori, to the notion of memento mori, the sense that eventually it all kind of disappears.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, I really enjoyed it, and
well,
I'm
you're in
excited
you're
for it.
you're in rarefied company, Matthew.
Yeah.
I lived my audience.
This the select club, yeah.
Like
Membership's very exclusive in the
yeah,
club.
very exclusive. Yeah, yeah, very rare, rarefied company.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. Are you doing any prose, any essays these days, or
No, I'm like the diver. I'm on the descent of my career now, so I've just devoted to poetry and
jettisoning prose?
yeah, yeah. If I do prose poems, maybe, but I'm not
Or-
writing any essays. I'm done with those arguments. I've pretty much said whatever it is I have to say. I don't have anything to add to anything. I just find the literary world so disheartening.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
glad I don't teach anymore. I'm glad I'm not on social media, with the exception of email and this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I will never go to AWP. I will, I'll never sit
Sure.
on a panel.
You're not missing
So
much.
there's certain perks about getting old that
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
appreciate now. And now I don't have to. I'm not looking over my shoulder. As I think I may have said this the last time I was on with you, that I truly, I stopped worrying about what anybody thinks of me when I realized that in fact nobody's thinking of me at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'll go and give a reading somewhere if someone can assure me that there'll actually be people there. If, because I don't really need to, travel, hundreds of miles to read to an empty room, which I've had. It just happened to me way too many times, and I
Yeah.
just don't need
Yeah.
that anymore. I don't send poems out to magazines if they get published. It's because someone's asked me for something.
Yeah.
I just stay home. I'm not doing any. I'm going to go to Baltimore to give a reading in the fall, and
Where were you reading in Baltimore?
at Loyola in
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Baltimore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I gave a reading at the Blacksmith House in Cambridge, and that's it. I
Nice.
haven't done.
Yeah.
I feel bad because the problem with social media for me is that it turns the writer into a self-promoter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and 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 you can get thousands of followers, I guess. It makes you, well, I'm speaking about
Sure.
for
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
would do to me, not what it does to anybody. It would make me expect something grand and big to happen as a result of publishing the book because you're out there. Yeah. And so it makes the disappointment when in fact,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
happens.
Right.
It's like the storm before the calm, and it intensifies one's disappointment because it raises your expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you further fall. Whereas now I don't have any expectations for this stuff. So it makes life a whole lot easier, and it makes working more pleasurable, more fun because, I mean, there are poems in this book that would be, if I would probably get canceled if I read them, in a public venue like the aging comic,
Yeah, which I mean does feel very it's very cutting, but it also just feels very vulnerable and true to the
well,
moment in
yeah,
a way that I think
yeah.
it would be hard to read it and not recognize, you'd have to sort of choose not to recognize what, yeah.
It goes back to what we were just saying. It's about, in fact, he's a figure for, I think, the quintessential emotional, psychological situation of most writers nowadays, which is that he's somebody, he's an older artist, a comic, who is still attached to material he recognizes is no longer appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, and knows he's got to give it up, but is expressing the reluctance to do it because he likes the jokes, and he's not nostalgic for the days when an audience was just all white and
Sure, yeah,
male,
yeah, yeah.
but he recognizes that it's a bigger room now, and so it makes the humor more problematic, and he misses the old days. But
Which
whatever
is
was wrong,
right,
he's
which
missing.
is a real feeling. And it's not one that this poem is inventing.
Well, yes, I don't mind putting it in the book. I probably wouldn't read it in public,
Sure. Yeah, 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 yeah.
but it's in the book. So
Yeah. No, I hadn't thought about it that way, that at least for somebody who writes poetry and prose, because I think if you're only writing prose, and prose is sort of the mode for everything you write, it's a little different. But I think for people who write both poetry and prose, there is a way in which when you write prose, you're writing for the living. And when
yeah,
you write poetry, you're writing for the dead and the not yet born.
that's right.
And so when
Yeah,
you've decided that you're sort of done with the living for
right.
now, you say, I'm going to withdraw from that. I don't need
Yeah,
to mess with prose anymore.
really good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
with social media, it's almost like you're writing for the awake right now, and hopped up on Adderall and ready to
Yeah,
ready to
yeah, yeah.
it is sort of like, yeah, that's and I mean, I'm sure there are some, maybe Patricia Lockwood, but like the number of people who are improved by exposure to social media is vanishingly few,
I'm
vanishingly
telling you,
small.
all of the whatever good it does in terms of keeping people connected to one another, and is so far outweighed by the damage of
Right. Yeah.
culture. And I say that as somebody who, if I were younger, I'd be on. I'd have to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
have to do it. It's just simply the way the world is. I don't begrudge anybody doing it, but I sit back and I see they're degrading themselves. They're abasing
Yeah. Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
you know? And it is. It's just you just can't be a self-promoter without suffering the degradation of that, you know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And that's what it turns us. And even the publishers are expecting writers now to do that, to get on and promote the
Yeah.
work. And I think, fucking, I did my work. I wrote the book. And if someone wants to read it, great. But it's not my job to. I try to make the poems as, you know, as inviting to a reader as possible. But that's it. You know, I didn't set out to do that. I'm just trying to make it as clear as I can. And whatever happens or doesn't happen is not beyond my control. I don't give a shit about it anymore, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my life is enriched and deepened by that, you know. Um,
Yeah. It also, it just might, I mean, I talked to Joanna, who does
yeah,
fiction and is publishes with big presses and has a little
yeah,
more experience with sort of
absolutely.
with actual promotion of books that
Yeah,
are thought of as real books in the world. But it feels. I mean, my impression is that even there, William Goldman's claim about Hollywood is truer than ever. That truly nobody knows anything.
yeah,
That even there, when they do spend a lot of money, when they have real budgets, when they have a whole big company behind it, people still don't know what's going on. They're still not able to plan reasonably. There's still not much rhyme or reason to what
that's right.
gets promoted and what doesn't. And even if it does get promoted, it's not clear that that has any real effect.
That's right. No, there's no way of proving one way or the other. And I know that, for instance, not that, poetry is always going to be limited to a small audience of last resistors. Uh,
Or the soldiers in the caves who don't know
in
the
the
wars
caves,
over.
right,
Yeah,
right. They hadn't been, we didn't realize our side has unconditionally
right.
surrendered. Even then, the difference between, like, when I was involved in giving readings and writing to people and can I get a reading here? Can I do that?
Yeah,
It didn't make any difference to the book, did. It didn't get more reviews. It didn't
no, no,
sell,
no,
but
no.
it's just exactly the same now as it was before, except that I get to stay home and I don't have to run around and humiliate myself, you know. So,
Right, right. Yeah,
but it doesn't make it. It does, nobody's paying attention, which is fine, you know.
no.
But as I said, I really like what you said. When you're writing poetry, you're looking at a much bigger, picture. You have to, because otherwise you'd just be, how would you continue? How would you continue writing if you didn't have that sense? And I to the point now where I even think I'm writing for the unborn, or that I'm writing for the language, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
writing to do something to the language, for the language in some ways, to find some expressive possibilities, particularly in sentences. And that's all I care about. That's all I think about,
but that is it's almost like the helicon or something, that there's this stream, or this current that writers touch across time, that it's in all of these poems that have lines, some of which are explicit. Some are in quotation marks, most are not. Some you're probably extremely aware of, and some are probably unconscious. But there are all of these lines and texts and textures from other poems
That's right.
in these poems, and that, I mean, to me, that's the landscape of language in the mind of a writer. So much of it comes from
I've
what
been
he's
writing.
read,
That's
and
right.
and
Mhm.
it whether you are whatever your ostensible audience, if you are writing poetry and you're writing it thoughtfully, you know I think maybe that's the version I most understand when people say that they're writing poetry for the sake of pure language, is that you're contributing to that current.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
you know you're dipping into and giving something back to whatever that is that crosses time and space,
Mhm.
that other writers also connect with, and that helps form the landscape in their own minds. That is the source of, I think, so much inspiration.
There's, as I just say, you feel as though you have one foot out of the world, one foot in the world, and at a certain stage in your career. And that's definitely how I feel right now,
Yeah, no, but yeah, thank you for this. Thanks for the
Yeah.
book. I was looking back over it, Glory Hunger again, which
Do you know the song that it's based on by Chris Stapleton?
no, is it
Where Rainbows Never Die, it's called. You should listen
okay?
to it. Fabulous song.
All right,
He did it before he went off on his own when he was part of that group. I forget the name of the group, the Steel Drivers or the Steam. I don't know.
okay.
Anyway, but Chris Stapleton, Where Rainbows Never Die.
Yeah, because
It's
you start with the country singer and the
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and that's who I had it. That's who that is. And that line that I quote from the song at one point.
I'm bound for glory. I'm an
Yeah,
old man now. I can't do nothing.
can't
Young
do now,
folks
can't do nothing.
wait on me.
That's how the song begins.
That was my conversation with Alan Shapiro. Go check out his book, Diver, out now from Unbound Editions. And if you would like to hear more SLEERICKETS, and if you would like to submit poems to Listener Crit episodes, then go to sleerickets.substack.com. You can put in your email address, and I will give you a week's access for free. After that, a subscription is really fucking cheap. If you would really like to listen, but you can't afford it, then write to me at sleerickets@gmail.com and I will hook you up. And if you have a little expendable income and you would like to do some more to support the show, you can sign up to become a founding member. Motherfucker of the Arts, you can choose your amount per month, and even a little bit every month makes a big difference. You can also go to sleerickets.com to the upper right-hand corner. It may be different if you're going on a phone, and just look for the chip in button. You can click on that and just donate any amount one time directly to the show. It helps keep the lights on here. Thank you all for listening, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.